Boom shakalaka, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters around the world, it is your chocolate Nubian soul brother, Chris Shule, aka the Esoteric Noetic, aka the Bitcoin MC, and it's been some time since I dropped a podcast, but you'll be glad to know that we are about to interview Lyn Ulbricht. Lyn is the mother of Ross Ulbricht. Now, if you're not familiar with the Ross Ulbricht story, the Silk Road story, take a deep breath, buckle up, because this is the coup de grace of issues relating to liberty. I think this entire story relates to everything that is wrong in the current governmental system, the legal system. And it touches on so many important issues. I mean, Silk Road was obviously the website that pushed Bitcoin to worldwide adoption. And Ross Ulbricht was the creator of Silk Road. This issue touches on violations of civil liberties. It touches on a new president in law. And not only is about Ross, but really is about all of us. I mean, one, it's frustrating having people that you care about being in jail, whether they're your friends or family or even distant relatives or people that you don't know on a face-to-face level. I mean, when you see injustice anywhere, it's a threat to justice everywhere, to quote Martin Luther King. And I think on a more practical level, this precedent that has been set means that any website, any ISP can now be responsible for not only their actions per se, which makes sense, but the actions of people that are on their website. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into this. I have Lyn waiting ever so patiently. I've kept her waiting long enough, so boom shakalaka. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get straight into it and discuss what I believe is the most important case of this century. Let's do it. Lyn, there you are. Lyn, I'm so sorry to keep you waiting there, but I do appreciate your patience. Lyn,
sure,
how are you doing?
Problem. I'm hanging in there.
You're hanging in there, of course. That's going to be expected.
Yeah.
I've been following this case for quite some time now, and just over the last, I guess, last few weeks, I've been going through all your videos on Free Ross. It looks like you're someone that's very active on the interwebs. And, I mean, one of the things that I find so fascinating about this entire case is I feel as if you're someone that is perfect for what's going on in regards to dealing with this affront to justice. I mean, you seem like someone that is very savvy when it comes to the law, when it comes to the internet. And when I hear you speak about these issues, I get the impression that you're someone that is definitely not new to discussing matters like this. Are you new to this entire scene of activism, or is this something that you've just fallen into?
Well, I've been at it now for almost 5 years, because that's when Ross was arrested. And, you know, I mean, I was somewhat aware of things and had my opinions and cared about liberty before. Mm-hmm. But after you see what the criminal justice system in the United States is doing, when you see it up close and personal, it really is hard to forget about it and move on. And of course we're caught in it, and I have had a very steep learning curve. I mean, I've had to law up to a point. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I've certainly learned a lot about it. And I had to learn how to tweet. I didn't know how to tweet. So I've had a lot of learning curves to conquer. But
sure.
I do have a journalism background, and I have a big mouth. So that's
Oh,
helped.
wow. Well, I don't have a journalism background, but I do have a big mouth, so we have a lot in common there. That's
Yeah,
one of
there
the
you go.
reasons
That's all you
I have
really
this
need.
podcast. And I believe that we often fall into doing things that we're supposed to do. And obviously, it's a travesty what's happened in regards to your son, but I think it's very inspiring that you are doing what you're doing, and I think you're in the position that you are in for a reason. Lyn, let's talk about Silk Road. I know you've done this countless times. You've spoken about how this entire thing started, but a lot of my subscribers would be new to what's going on. A lot of people have simply heard the mainstream story. They think that Silk Road, Ross Ulbricht was someone that was a kingpin of some sort, and he's been arrested because he hired people to do X and Y. So let's first of all clear up the facts in regards to this. I know there's a lot of misinformation, but can you just take us through what Silk Road was and how Ross got involved in this entire ordeal? That would be a great place to start, I think.
Okay. Well, Ross created this website, Silk Road, because he was passionate about free markets and privacy. He had been working on the Ron Paul campaign. He had actually created a video game about free markets for people to have an actual hands-on experience of what it would be like to be in an actual free market, and that was not published. So this was his vision. And the idea was to have a website that was a true open market that protected user privacy and anonymity. It wasn't a drug market per se. That's not necessarily, from what I understand, it was really user driven. It was, what people chose to exchange and buy and sell on the site using Bitcoin, which was very little known at the time. It was really the first use case of Bitcoin, I think, or certainly one of them, that showed how Bitcoin could be used. So that was what it was really about. Now, there were things that were prohibited because Ross and the administrators of the site, whoever they were, because I believe there were many, believed in voluntary interaction and not using force and not victimizing people. Which,
Sure.
If you think he's a kingpin, I don't think there's too many kingpins who care about voluntary interaction or not using force. I mean, to call a website host a kingpin is a real stretch. It's like saying Jeff Bezos is a kingpin, and he is controlling every transaction on Amazon. It's a way for the government to add on a life sentence.
Yeah. If anything sounds like a kingpin to me, sorry to cut you off there. It's just fascinating to me how we often we often prescribe these labels for people. And I mean, you have a look at the way the government behaves in regards to threatening people to behave in a particular way. Otherwise, they'll take all their money, and planting evidence, which I think there is evidence for that the people within the government organization may have done in regards to this case. And if anything, that strikes me as kingpin-like behavior. But sorry. Yeah, go on there.
Who is the kingpin? Please stand up. Yeah. So in any case, certain things were prohibited that weren't voluntary, such as child pornography was not allowed. Violent services were not allowed. Stolen property was not allowed. Different. And it was a whole list, and it's published. It's out there of things that were not permitted by the administrators and were removed from the site when they were discovered if people didn't, go by the rules. So, and it had a book club, and it had, a doctor who would give people advice, help them get off drugs if they wanted to, help them in situations. I don't think too many kingpins have that either. It's just, look, I'm not defending everything on Silk Road or, and all of that. I think probably a lot, obviously a lot of things that were on there can be destructive, just like Amazon. I mean, again, there's a woman that was suing Jeff Bezos and Amazon because her daughter bought cyanide in Amazon and used it to kill herself. It's, don't take cyanide, but I don't see Jeff Bezos being hauled into court, and I don't think he should be. And I can bring up example after example: Craigslist, eBay,
Exactly.
Facebook Live. There are murders on Facebook Live. So, in any case, so that's kind of an overview. Now, granted, there were a lot of people selling drugs that were attracted to the anonymity of the site. 70% is what I understand was marijuana, small amounts of marijuana. That was by far the most commonly exchanged item on the site. Well, of course, that's becoming legal in the United States. So, you know, I think it was very much distorted at trial. It was. And the only thing allowed to be mentioned were drugs, even though, and mostly hard drugs, even though there were legal things. There were books and art and gold and all kinds of things that were legal or non-drug items exchanged. So they painted a very skewed picture of the site and of Ross himself.
Sure. I guess what I find really fascinating about this case is where is it in the current legal system? I mean, people are held accountable for taking substances that are not directly harming anyone, obviously like marijuana, and the list goes on and on and on. But I guess what is unique in regards to this case is we have a situation where someone's created a website that allows people to trade substances, and obviously those substances may or may not be legal, but the idea, I think it's a new precedent, I think I've heard you speak about this, the idea of charging a website creator for the actions of the people on the website. Now, apparently that's the first time we've seen that, and if you could speak a little bit more about that. I mean, is this the first time we've seen a case like that? Because it's obviously setting up a very dangerous precedent for ISPs. I mean, the idea that you can create a website now, and you may have had good intentions, and obviously there is this transfer of intent I've heard you speak about. Now you can be it's, of course, it's very difficult to prove whether or not someone was intending something to be malicious when they created that website. They were intending for malicious things to be done on the website. So it's this entire gray area. How do you first of all prove that someone was intending to do what you claim, and should they be held accountable for the actions of other people?
Well, as far as I know, Ross is the only person who's been criminally charged with for being a website host and for the activities on his site. I think there have been civil cases, but they've been thrown out. Well, I know there have, because Backpage was one of them, and that was a state case. Actually, it wasn't civil; it was a state case, and the judge said, "Well, this is a freedom of speech issue because you can't hold a website host responsible for what people do on the site." Exactly that argument. But that was in the state of California, and so they were. It was thrown out. But in this case, it was federal and it was criminal. So he is, I believe, the first, and it does set up a very troubling precedent because you don't necessarily know what's going on your site, but you are responsible for it anyway, and that's basically what this is saying. And you know, whether you know it or not, the law is you're responsible, which could put a bit of a chill on innovation on the internet. So yeah, it's an issue.
Yeah, no doubt. So in regards to the sentencing, I mean, I think that's the most disturbing thing about this entire thing. There are a lot of people that are very obviously anti-drugs in the world, and then there are people that are obviously in favor of it. They believe in the idea that you have a right to put what you want in your body. But I think everyone that I've spoken to, at least, thinks that the sentencing for Ross was, to put it mildly, completely insane. I mean, I know that you can be facing up to 20 years for possessing substances like that, but now I've heard you speak about how the judge definitely had a bias towards Ross's philosophy, and I think one of the frustrating things about this case is that there were claims made in regards to Ross hiring hitmen that were not actually put up into question in the court system. They didn't actually charge him for this, but that actually made its way into the sentencing. So, I mean, how is something like that even possible in the legal system? Because from what I understand, the reason why Ross got essentially almost 3 life sentences is because he was somehow deemed to be someone that has hired hitmen. Is there any truth to that? And
you covered a lot of things here, but let's start with that one. Those charges it was only charged in one place, formally in an indictment. It was in the criminal complaint in New York, but then they did not. And when the indictment came out, those charges were not there. and it was not charged at trial. It was not ruled on by a jury. He was not convicted of it. And that is a misinformation that a lot of people have. It's not true. In Maryland, up until very recently, there was this other indictment, which included those charges and other charges, sitting there for almost 5 years, you know, poisoning the atmosphere, putting this cloud over Ross of uncharged allegations that he couldn't defend himself against because they didn't bring it to trial for 5 years. And then they didn't ever, they just dropped it recently. So that is correct. They were not charged at trial, and actually but the judge relied heavily on them to justify her sentence, and the appellate court said, oh yeah, the murder for hire drove this sentencing, and they seemed to think that was fine. And Ross and his legal team petitioned the United States Supreme Court on this issue, 2 issues, this was one of them, because it's a violation of the Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial in our Constitution, in the United States. We get to have a jury. If you're going to charge somebody or you're going to allege something and use it in a sentencing, it needs to be decided that he's guilty and he's convicted.
Of course.
And this judge decided she knows better. She knew better than the 12 people on the jury, and she bypassed the Sixth Amendment and went ahead and did it anyway. And this is very troubling, not only for, obviously, Ross personally, but for all of us, because it means we're losing very rapidly our protections that the founders of the United States put into place to prevent the accused from being victimized by, for example, a judge. One judge instead. That's why you have 12 jury members. So she did that anyway, and the Supreme Court didn't seem to mind. They denied it.
That's
which I'm like, if you're not going to defend the Constitution, what are you doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know you're someone that has a lot of respect for the Constitution, which I do, but you have a look at the current legal system we have, and there's so many instances where it's been completely destroyed. I mean, basically the legal system, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't have any respect for the Constitution. So I don't have too much respect for the current legal system. I mean, the simple idea of preventing people from using substances like marijuana, I'm pretty sure there wasn't anything in the Constitution in regards to preventing people from taking innocuous substances like that. But of course, we have a situation. So I feel as if the legal system can always circumvent the Constitution and come up with all of these legal loopholes to essentially do what they want. But I think the most disturbing thing is this sentencing for crimes for this whole idea of him being sentenced for a charge that was never even officially brought up. And I know recently there's been some light that's come on that. From what I understand, the official charges in regards to Ross hiring hitmen, that's been dropped. Was that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's what I was just saying, that in Maryland, that's the only place he was charged with it. And it was just sitting there. Like I said, they didn't do anything. They didn't prosecute it. They did nothing with it. They just dismissed those charges.
Yeah, doesn't
with prejudice, which means it can never be brought up again.
Well, I guess the frustrating thing is, I mean, the guy's obviously in jail. He's been there for 5 years, and the reason the sentencing was so harsh related specifically to this charge. And even though that's been removed, he's still in. I mean, that sentence hasn't been changed. Isn't there anything you can do legally in regards to I guess getting that particular issue relooked at, considering that it no longer has any precedent now?
From what I understand, in the court system, we are out of options for direct appeal. There is one thing called a habeas petition. It's not really about that specifically, but maybe it will help. What will really help with that is that it was going to be before the same judge who gave him double life, and she's retiring, which I'm thrilled to hear. And so at least it won't be in front of her. I don't see how it could be any worse. So, but that's one of those things that people say, well, that hardly ever works, but of course we'll try everything. I think it will also help with clemency with the president, because I think if you have a pending indictment over you that includes violence or violent intent, that's not great for getting your sentence commuted. But Ross, just to be clear, all his charges, his actual charges, nonviolent, He has no prior history of any kind of violence. He has no prior criminal history. He's a first-time offender. He's essentially being given double life plus 40 years with no parole, no possibility of parole, for something he created when he was 26 years old. And I would like to ask anybody out there, if at 26 you might have done something that later you were like, that was kind of reckless, or that was a mistake, or whatever. It's like 26 years old. People mature, they change, and yet this government is giving excessive sentences like that commonly. Life sentences have quintupled since the drug war in the United States. It used to be, when I was growing up, nobody got a life sentence unless they were a maniac, mass murdering, killer that was a real danger to people. And now, Ross, he just published a picture on his Twitter feed of him with fellow inmates. And just, for example, one of them, Tony DeJohn, he's in there for life for selling marijuana 13 years ago in a federal prison in Colorado where it's legal. But it's a federal prison, and he's serving life sentence for marijuana, and he's not the only one. And, it's just really evil what's going on with the drug war and how they're using it.
No doubt. If this thing wasn't so serious, it would be laughable, but it's exactly. Insanely disgusting. Sure. And I want to talk about Russ's personality here a little, because look, I think every mother is going to have positive things to say about
of course.
About their son. But I watched a video of Ross, and I read the tweet that he recently shared in regards to the judge, and he strikes to me, I think any person that is capable of writing something like that, he strikes me as a pacifist, someone that, for people that haven't seen the tweet, essentially this is the judge that sentenced Ross for 2 life sentences in 40 years. And showed a lot of prejudice towards him based off of this philosophy, which is essentially the philosophy of freedom, which is essentially the philosophy that the United States Constitution was based off of. This whole philosophy of Lockean property rights, and this is Ross's philosophy. Now, this judge sentences him for almost 3 life sentences, and Ross responds by saying that he doesn't wish the judge any ill and hopes that she finds peace. And I think most of us, I was speaking to a lot of my friends about this, and I consider them to be very very moral people. They're libertarians, and they had so much hate towards this judge. And Ross is the kind of person that's like, you know what, I don't wish you ill. And I think anyone that has that kind of mindset, and anyone, you watch this guy's videos. I've seen only one video of him interacting, and he strikes me as an absolute like a sweetheart. And of course, I've been hearing everything that you've been saying about him, and then I've been reading the comments of people and seeing this stuff verified. And it's just, it's one thing. I think a lot of people are don't like the idea of someone being in jail for a crime like marijuana, but they can somehow justify it by saying that, look, these people are criminals anyway. They probably deserve to be there. But when you see an absolutely innocent person, someone that has that kind of moral substance, integrity, it makes it even worse. And I feel like you couldn't have a worse situation. Seeing someone like Ross, who is this pacifist-like person, dealing with it, I find it very inspiring the way that he is dealing with it. I've heard you speak about how he's being very strong for you, and he's taken up yoga, and he's taken on a very spiritual attitude. But it's such a travesty when someone that is that innocent ends up in that scenario. And honestly, when I saw that tweet, I'm like, well, Ross, you're a better man than I am. Yeah, I think a lot of us felt that way.
It's like, but I think part of it is, I have, sometimes when I'm like, oh, these people, I hate these people, whatever, sometimes I vent. And he's like, no, don't, no. He doesn't, he says, who is it really hurting when you hate and are bitter? You. And it weakens you. And he came to terms with it. And he won't harbor that. He just wants to be a free man again. And he's very compassionate. He helps his fellow inmates in there all the time. He's about to teach a class in math. And he's been doing that all along. He's very well liked in there by the way, prison staff as well as fellow inmates. They come up to me and go, what's he doing in here? He shouldn't be in here. You know, they're very sympathetic, they really, you know, well, they really like him. So he is, and there's 100 letters on our website from people who know him, and 4 of them are inmates who attest to his character. If you read some of those letters, you're like, wow, this is horrible that he's in there for life. I mean, the judge could have given him 20 years. That was the mandatory minimum for the kingpin charge and the drug traffic, conspiracy to traffic in drugs. Not that he sold them, but that it was the conspiracy, right? 20 years, but that wasn't long enough for her. A generation wasn't long enough for her. 30 years wasn't long enough. 40. She's not going to be happy till he leaves there a corpse. And this is such an abuse of power that it's appalling to me. It's like I'm like, is this my country anymore? I feel like it's being hijacked. And like I said, it didn't used to be like this.
I think a lot of
this is why the United States leads the world in incarcerated people. This is outrageous. This is, you know, it used to be, it was a steady 180,000 people in prison, sized 800%. And they were making so much money, and they're grabbing so much power with it, and it's all fueled by the drug war. If you took away drug offenses in the prisons, most of them would shut down. Whole towns, like the one I live in, would be totally depressed. And, you know, it's the drug war.
Well, I think that's it.
It's not stopping drugs. It's not stopping anyone from using drugs. So it's kind of like, well, what are you really about then? Because even the government could figure that out after 45 years and $1 trillion, I think.
Sure. Well, clearly this thing is not just about an individual. I mean, obviously the government,
right,
the prosecutor was trying to set a precedent here. I think because what happened in regards to Silk Road, it was so concerning to the government that they wanted to obviously dissuade people from doing anything like this, thus the harsh sentence. But I know that since this entire thing went down, we've actually seen an increase in use of websites like Silk Road. And I mean, history is riddled with this kind of stuff. Anytime the government tries to prevent people from using certain substance, whether it's alcohol or drugs, I mean, you only see an increase. Because I feel like the main issue as you're saying, this is obviously about a drug war, but I also feel as if it's also about a philosophical war. I mean, you have the government saying that we need to,
agree.
We need to essentially prevent people from using substances that could potentially affect people in a negative way. I mean, let's say that is actually what they believe, even though I think it's actually more about controlling people. Now, the argument, I've heard Nick Bilton talk about this, and granted, I believe he's being sincere. I think it's somewhat of a misguided attitude. His whole approach is that whereas he can understand that certain drugs like marijuana are obviously innocuous and they should be legal, he looks at certain substances like fentanyl and things of that nature to be very poisonous, and allowing people to trade substances like this is obviously going to have a detrimental impact. Now, granted, people from a libertarian perspective have the right to freely trade what they want. Because he's so concerned, people like Nick and people like a lot of, I would call people that have a lot of sympathies for the government or the legal system, their entire mentality is because they're trying to prevent harm from eventuating, they want to restrict these substances. And when they see someone like Ross that is facilitating this, regardless of whether or not he may have intended to do this, all they look at is the consequences, and if they can do anything to send a message to people not to facilitate these drugs, that's all they're concerned with. Now, of course, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I think there are clearly two distinctive philosophies that are going on here, and because the government is so hell-bent on trying to dissuade people from using these substances, that's what we currently see, and that's why Ross was sentenced so harshly.
Well, the thing is, there's a couple of points. You know, you brought up the Constitution.
Sure.
But when alcohol was prohibited, they passed an amendment, and then when it didn't work, and it created the mafia, and it made everybody criminals, and the typical prohibition results. Then they had to have an amendment to repeal it. They have an amendment about drugs. There's no authority anywhere about making any of these things, certainly on the federal level, illegal. Now, you may think it's really bad, and I could probably agree with you that a lot of these things are bad. The problem is it doesn't work. Prohibition doesn't work. They've been working at it now for over 45 years with drugs, over $1 trillion, and that doesn't even count the cost of mass incarceration, which is I can't fathom how much that costs. People are still doing drugs. They can't even keep drugs out of the prison. It's sort of like, hello, why don't we look at what might actually work?
Exactly.
And also, this is a power grab. You don't get to tell people without any constitutional authority or some kind of, just write yourself a memo. Okay, now I have the power because I have the guns behind it. It's a slippery slope. And you brought up how I think you did the drug war is eviscerating our rights. There's a drug exception that everybody knows about that works in the courts, where if it's a drug case, the Constitution goes out the window. Well, this is dangerous. This is like, wait a minute, it's either the Constitution or it's not. And I understand it's been decimated, but it is the law of the land and like you say, they're not paying attention.
Exactly.
So you can agree or disagree about what drugs are good or bad. Cigarettes are really bad. Alcohol. I know someone whose loved one killed himself with alcohol. I mean, literally OD'd on it. We know all about drunk driving, all that. That's all legal. Other things aren't legal. I could make the case don't do any of it. Okay. I barely do, any of alcohol at all ever, and certainly don't smoke cigarettes. So or anything. But in any case, my point is, do we have a personal choice or don't we? And where's the authority to tell people what they can do?
Absolutely.
And besides which, if you're trying to force them, it's not going to work anyway.
I'm completely on board with what you're saying. You're obviously someone that believes in the Constitution, has very libertarian ideals. And I'm curious, I mean, is this something that you've always had as far as your perspective towards the legal system, or has it changed in any way since the entire your son was incarcerated and you found out just how evil this entire system can be? What's the biggest thing, I guess, that's changed your thinking ever since this whole thing went down?
Watching how they operate when they prosecute someone and take them to trial with my own eyes. And things like, I said to our lawyer, well, wait, they didn't charge him with murder for hire. How can they talk about it? And he goes, oh, yeah, they do that. Yeah, they do that. I'm like, what? What do you mean they do that? I had this whole, and many people have this whole concept that, well, that's not fair. That's one example. There's many. They did all kinds of things before trial, during, and after to hamper. They dumped 4 terabytes of material on the defense. Say, here, go through that and find out what evidence we have. That's like 1 billion or 2 billion typewritten pages, something like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, they hold it to the last minute and then do that. I go on and on. It's they pressure people to plea that may be innocent and threaten them. These are they, meaning the prosecutors, and the truth is they probably will lose a trial. That's why 98% of the people plea. We're losing the trial by jury. We're losing fair trials. It's on and on. So that I've seen it with my own eyes, and you can't deny it with something you see with your own eyes.
No doubt.
So I was an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur. My husband and I, we kind of always like, please leave me alone, government. Just leave me alone. I just want to live my life. Law abiding and everything. But it's like, so I lean that way. But when I took the little test, what political affiliation, I'd lean libertarian. Mm-hmm. But now what I've seen is beyond what I realized. It's much more alarming than what I realized.
Yeah, and I guess that's the that's the thing that a lot of people aren't aware of. They live their lives not realizing just how the legal system works, and once they actually have a run-in with government and they see how incredibly corrupt the entire thing is, they tend to become a bit more libertarian leaning. I know that you've been on the Alex Jones show, and like just in regards to solutions to this entire ordeal, I know that it's happened before, presidential pardons, and I think I had this idea in my head before I did this podcast this morning that if anyone was going to pardon, or get Donald Trump to, let's say, pardon Ross Ulbricht, it would be someone like Alex Jones. I mean, the fact that this guy was someone that was able to hugely influence Donald Trump being elected, the fact that he's so sympathetic to the case, I think it would be amazing if we could put pressure on, well, on any figures that have influence to obviously to get Donald Trump to pardon, because things like this obviously have happened. I know Obama gave a presidential pardon to a guy that was in a similar situation to Ross, in regards to someone that had taken drugs, I think, and was serving life sentence. And I really do believe that this is something that is going to happen. I think it's only a matter of time. I can't, even in my most I guess like darkest outlook, I can't imagine someone like Ross spending his entire life knowing that this is something that is becoming more and more spoken about. I can't see a society that allows this to continue forever. I think that we're always moving towards being, I guess, more of a, I guess we're always learning, and I like to believe that society is moving towards a libertarian mindset. Ever since Ron Paul, we've seen a lot of people adopt this libertarian philosophy. So I think it's only a matter of time until we see, if not Donald Trump, hopefully Adam Kokesh. I know, as crazy as that may sound, I know he's running for president soon, but I definitely believe it's something that we're going to see in due time. But yeah, one of the things I wanted to talk about with you, just in regards to I guess what we can do, I guess it would be great if you could paint a picture of what something like this requires as far as the fees in getting lawyers to defend a case like this. I mean, can you tell me about what you've had to go through financially, and also what we can do to support this cause?
Yeah, and I just want to say, because we kind of touched on this earlier, it has become a bigger cause for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's and for Ross. It's like, because I meet the families in the prison, I hear about these other cases. Ross is not unique, and this is going on by the thousands and thousands and thousands of people here in the United States, and it's just horrendous. And so I'm hoping that Ross's case will not only, shining a light on his case will not only get him out of there, but will change things to stop this horrendous trend of mass incarceration in the United States. It's un-American. That's, it's just wrong. It's a human rights crisis. It's, national disgrace, really. But anyway, it is hard. It's very hard to fight the federal government. They have unlimited money, unlimited manpower, and they crush you because you don't have the money. It's very expensive. And we have just been very, very blessed to have so many great people with large donations and small walk beside us through this for years now, and to enable us to retain attorneys. And because I feel like you got to have one. I mean, some people don't think you should do it yourself, but I just don't feel qualified. I don't think Ross is qualified. You don't always get a good one, maybe, but you just keep trying. Sometimes you get great ones, like the ones that were Ross's Supreme Court lawyers. I can't imagine better lawyers, more wonderful people. But yeah, it costs. And we continue to have costs. We're going to hire a pardon attorney, to help with that process. Things like that. And there's that other court issue I told you about. Those all require lawyers. And so we've raised money in lots of ways, but you can go to freeross.org. There's a donate page. But really the thing I'm most interested in is connections with the president, or with political people that might have connections with the president, and the petition, which is on freeross.org. We already, I think we broke today 46,000, and it's only been a little over 2 weeks. So we're really getting a wonderful response to it. And I'd like at least 500,000 signatures where the president can go, wow, okay, this is something maybe I need to look at. That's what it's about now. And, you know, really what I care about, obviously, is having my son out and also changing things in general for what's going on with the criminal justice system in this country.
Absolutely. I think it's very encouraging. I mean, the sheer fact that we have the Bitcoin community that is very invested in what you're doing. I think anyone that has been following this realizes just how pivotal Silk Road was in promoting Bitcoin. And obviously we have figures like Roger Ver now. And
Roger's
I
great.
think anyone that believes in the power of cryptocurrencies, I think they tend to have a libertarian bent on things. So I think they naturally tend to lean towards wanting to see someone like Ross freed. So I think it's very fortunate that that the community is obviously the kind of community that would work towards seeing someone like Ross freed. I have no doubt with certain figures like with Roger Ver, Calvin Ayre, there are all these billionaires that are in the crypto scene. I think you're definitely in good hands in regards to people that are obviously wanting to see something like this, come to justice, true justice. You know what I mean?
I mean, Roger's been pivotal in us getting through the courts and everything with his financial support and other kinds of support, and so have others. But Roger really stands out. But many others as well, and also who supported the petition. For instance, Charlie Lee of Litecoin and Eric Voorhees of Shapeshift, and they've come out and said, we're signing the petition and you should too. Appreciate people who are, leaders in this space doing that. And it makes a big difference.
Sure. Well, one little, I guess it's a technical issue that I wanted to cover. I think that gets spoken about quite a lot. And in regards to Russ's alias, Dead Pirate Roberts. Now, I know one of the claims that Nick Bilton made was that there was only one Dead Pirate Roberts, and I've heard you speak quite passionately about how there's a lot of evidence to show that that wasn't the case. And I mean, I think the prosecution was hinging on this idea that Russ was responsible for that all the blame fell on Russ, when in fact there are many other people that could have used the site to do what was done. So can we speak about just a bit in regards to the evidence for that? Because I think a lot of people don't understand the facts pertaining to this.
I'd love to know how Nick Bilton explains that Dread Pirate Roberts, from his account, logged into the Silk Road forum when Ross was in solitary confinement, if there was only one. There was also evidence in the trial of that was not allowed to be known to the jury at the last minute, of there was this character named, by the pseudonym Inigo, who testified to the prosecution that he and DPR had a special signal or handshake so that the next time they spoke, he'd know for sure it was the same person, because everybody knew, and it's anecdotal, it's in deep web, it's lots of people say it. There are lots of people using the handle. And so the next time that he talked to DPR, he couldn't remember the prompt. He couldn't remember the digital handshake. That wasn't even allowed to be told to the jury. It's like, there's so many things that are like, really? There was only one person. But see, that fits the government's narrative. That is the 20th century model. You get your guy, you put him in jail forever. And I don't know even if they really understand how, these things work. But I was also warned, as regards Nick Bilton, I was warned, he wanted me to be involved in the book, and I was warned, no, don't talk to him, because he is going to present the government's narrative. And I was also told by someone that I trust that he actually was fed, the government fed him material even before trial. So as far as I can tell, Nick Bilton was the government's mouthpiece. Now, and I haven't read the book, but I've read excerpts, and some of them I'm like, wow, that's a distortion. I feel like, I don't know, I don't really rely on Nick Bilton's opinion about how many DPRs or, anything else much.
Sure. No doubt this has been an absolutely devastating ordeal, and I've heard you speak about how you know, it's basically giving you broken heart syndrome. But I find it really encouraging that, I mean, whereas you're obviously someone that is deeply affected by this, like you seem to be holding yourself strong. You seem to be the perfect activist, really. I listen to the way that you deal with people in interviews. You know, you stand firm. You don't want to comment on anything that you're not quite sure of. You try to be as honest as you can and everything. And I find it very inspiring what you're doing. And I think a lot of people have this idea that this case is just about Ross, but it's obviously about a lot more than that. I think people that are in the movement see this as having such a massive effect on the world as we know it. I mean, the fact that we're living in an age now where you can be held responsible for simply not your own actions per se, but but things that aren't related to you. I think that's very disturbing, and I think this entire case really represents. I think it's become a symbol for how incredibly corrupt the governmental system, or at least the legal system, is. And I think a lot of people are obviously they want to see justice come to this. So I guess I just want to say I really respect what you're doing, Lyn. I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
I think there's nothing more beautiful than when a mother is really fighting for a son, and the fact that you're doing this in such a passionate way, and you're representing the libertarian ideals. I find that very inspiring. So, Lyn, I salute what you're doing.
Kind. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on this podcast.
Happy to. Yeah, it's fun.
And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be putting some. Oh, just before I end this, I did want to ask you one more thing. We had just one question from someone on the interwebs that just wanted to ask in regards to the case. Now, it's a little technical. I'm not too familiar with this, but perhaps you can answer this for me. Now, this is from Rothbard's disciple, very active in the crypto scene. He asked, what stories concerning agents Force and Bridges are true? Some articles said that they were arrested trying to leave the country. Some articles said that they harassed Karpeles at Mount Gox, and other articles said they were behind the murder for hire claims. Is this something you know anything about, and what's true in regards to this from your...
Good question. There's a whole lot of sealed, undisclosed, and encrypted evidence that the government will not release about them. But yeah, Bridges was caught trying to leave the country after he was arrested. The main thing about them to me is that the judge would not let the jury know they even existed. You know, it's like, here's these corrupt agents who had the complete run of the Silk Road site. They could act as DPR or other aliases. They could change passwords, PIN numbers, post anything, delete anything, and the jury wasn't allowed to know they existed. This is a problem. As regards whether they're behind, you know, Force did submit the evidence in the form of a chat saying, here's the proof of murder for hire. He's now in prison. He is obviously not a trustworthy, and I might say that chat to me is so phony. It's all perfectly punctuated in capital letters. Ross types like a techie. He's not, I rarely see a capital letter from him. You know, it's like, this does not sound like him. Sorry. I mean, that's just my anecdotal input, but it just seemed phony. To me, it seemed like the same person wrote both sides, but that's just me. As regards Karpeles, I don't know all the ins and outs. I believe Bridges was connected to him somehow, but actually we're going to be publishing at some point. We're compiling all the public evidence we can and kind of putting it into a narrative form with footnotes, over 350 footnotes, which goes into a lot of that. And once we have it complete, I'll let you know. It's pretty shocking when you read it. And it's all based on public evidence.
Fantastic. Well, Lyn, once again, thank you so much for what you're doing. And I'd love to have you back on this podcast once you get more information. Okay. You're an absolute scholar. I think you're an inspiration to many of us that see the horrible injustice in regards to this case. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. God bless. Okay. I look forward to sharing this on the interwebs. I think more people need to share this, get the information out there, get this onto big influencers.
Sign the petition.
Sign the petition.
Sign
Absolutely.
the petition, please.
Yeah,
and
so
share the petition.
I'll be sure to put the links on this video. You can go to freeross.org, I think it is. yeah, if you want to find out more
about
there's
a big banner on the home page of the petition. Just click it, and there it is.
Fantastic. So, ladies and gentlemen,
thank you.
Sign the petition. Do what you can. Get this message out there. I think eventually, I'm going to make a prediction. I do believe that in time, I mean, I truly believe that Ross will get at some point get some pardon. I can't see this kind of travesty going on forever. But that's
I do too.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to sign the petition and do everything you can to make this a reality. Lyn, I really appreciate you giving up your time to come on this podcast. And
oh, my pleasure.
Be sure to keep us posted. Thank you so much.
I sure will. Thank you.
God bless.
Bless you too.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. The amazing, the compassionate, the beautiful Lyn Ulbricht. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, if you want to do what you can to support Ross, be sure to go to freeross.org. Be sure to sign the petition. I'll have the links on this video. I think regardless of whether or not you have a libertarian bent on things, or you're someone that just is completely mortified by just the injustice here, yeah, do what you can. Don't just sit down and feel like it's injustice. Act. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it there. It's been an absolute pleasure having Lyn on the Christian Journey podcast. Be sure to comment on this video. Let us know what you think, and share it. Tell your mom. Let's get this out there. Let's free Ross. Until next time, peace out. Keep it real. Don't drive and text. This is the Christian Journey podcast. Ow!
Told me that it can't be done, but I told you the battle was over before the game was done. Now if you think that I'm gonna let you run